I'm Ross Sandler, Professor of Law and Director of the Center for New York City Law, and I welcome you to this 149th City Law Breakfast, which is a wonderful record that we're very proud of. The breakfasts have some wonderful, loyal sponsors. I want to acknowledge them. First, the law firm of Greenberg Traurig, Consolidated Edison, and Verizon have all been founding sponsors, and I want to thank them. And also, I want to the special sponsor of today's breakfast, Guidepost Solutions. Thank you for that. And also, I want to call to your attention the ones with gold stars on their nameplates. Those are the people who have given voluntary contributions, and there are forms on the table. So, not to put too fine a point on it, but we love it if you contribute, because that allows us to continue having these breakfasts and go to the 150th and perhaps even to the 200th breakfast. We normally begin with welcome by our Dean, Anthony Crowell, who is away on important law school business, so he's not here today. So I will go right to the introduction. We're delighted to have Commissioner O'Neill here. We really are very honored that he was willing to come and speak at this forum to the law school community, to the civic community, and we're really delighted that he's here. Commissioner O'Neill grew up in Flatbush, Brooklyn, one of 7 children. He joined the police department in 1983 in the transit, what was then the Transit Police, where he served and then a most interesting and difficult assignments all through the subways of the city. Eventually, the Transit Police were merged in the NYPD during the mayoralty of Rudy Giuliani, 1995, and he moved into the NYPD. His service has been really remarkable because it's been so varied and all over the city and with so many important responsibilities. He's been assigned to the Police Academy, the 52nd Precinct, which is the Northern Bronx, Central Park Precinct, 25th Precinct, East Harlem, 44th Precinct, Western Bronx. He's worked in the Vice Division, Narcotics Division, Fugitive Enforcement Division, and throughout his career he has brought to him the knowledge and the experience which is so important to him now as he brings those experiences to the neighborhood policing and the community policing, which is now so important to the city of New York. He was one of the key leaders under Commissioner Bratton, who spoke here twice about the changes in police and policing. And he's carried on those traditions and improved them and taken them forward. When you look at the police department's website, unlike many city agencies, which often have a statement by the commissioner, which is just very innocuous, plain vanilla, on the police site, there's a statement by Commissioner O'Neill, and it really is a personal statement. I want to just quote a line or two from it. He said, "We care deeply about New York City and its people, and we strive every day to keep them safe. It's what we love to do, and we do it better than any other police force anywhere." And that I'm happy and feel honored to bring to this podium Commissioner O'Neill.
Morning, everybody. Must be early. All right, no problem. I'm drinking decaf, so this is what I've been reduced to. It's a blood pressure thing. Thank you, Ross, for that wonderful introduction. I just want to talk for a couple of seconds about when I came on in January 1983. So I do come from a large family, 7. I'm number 4. My mom, I'm not sure at times if she even knew my name, but that's okay. But you know, when I told her I was going to join the police department, she wasn't pleased, not at all. I don't come from a cop family, police family. I have an uncle, my Uncle Bill, passed away a couple of years ago. He was a lieutenant. He retired in 1973. He went on to teach at Westchester Community College for 20 years after that, but he was the only police officer I really knew. So I don't know why I was in my blood. I don't know why I was in my bones, but it was. And I came on when I was 25, which is, now it's the average age. Back in 1983, that was probably a little older. Most people came on around 21 and 22 years old. And the reason why I'm telling you this, because And I got a lot of pressure from my mom not to do it. I got a little bit of pressure from some of my relatives not to do it. I got some of my siblings are always very supportive of me. My older sister Sheila told me that, you should do it. I was working for an insurance company at the time. I guess if I stayed there, I would have probably made some money or probably been laid off. So it was a 50-50 shot. But so I jumped in. I was 25, wasn't married yet, and I joined the New York City Transit Police, which wasn't the NYPD. It was a 4,000 person police department, and back in the 80s, the subway was a pretty tough place. I think everybody's looking around the room here. I think some of you might have been riding the subways back in the 80s. And nothing personal, but so went through the academy, went through the NYPD academy, and came out in June of 1983. And back then, when you came out of the police academy as a transit cop, you went one place. You went to train patrol. And that was from 8 at night to 4 in the morning, and you rode the subway. You didn't ride it the whole line, but I was assigned to District 3, which is up on 146 in St. Nick. And I rode from 168 in Broadway to J Street in Brooklyn. We did that 3 round trips a night. And if I wasn't on the A line, I was on the D line. And we rode from 34th and 6th up to Bedford Park Boulevard in the Bronx. And I think the only time I was ever in the Bronx before that was maybe at a Yankee game. But what that experience did for me, and you're by yourself. You're by yourself, and back then the radios were none too good, not always reliable. There was especially, if you take the A train at all, you probably know from 59th to 125th Street, there's a 6-minute stretch there where you are absolutely on your own. If something happens as soon as you pull out of that station, you're on your own for 6 minutes. And you say, 6 minutes, how long is that? Get into a bad situation and see how long 6 minutes is. Get into a bad situation and see how long a minute is. So they had all sorts of rules about what you were supposed to do on train patrol. And one of the rules was you couldn't stay in one car for more than 3 stops. And every time you hit a train stop, you had to pop your head out. And we had sergeants and lieutenants and everybody's checking up on us. And I didn't really need that. I knew what I wanted to do. But the reason why I'm telling you this is this really, for me, that assignment made me sure, validated my decision to become a police officer. What I saw back in 1983 as I went from car to car, when people looked up at 1 o'clock in the morning, 2 o'clock in the morning, you go, well, who's riding the trains at 1 or 2 in the morning? People going back and forth to work. That's who's riding the trains. This is a subway system, 24 hours a day, 7 days a week, 365 days of work, people going back and forth to work. On Thursday, Friday, Saturday night, maybe people going out to the city. But most of the time, it's just people looking to get back and forth to work. And if you could see just the look of relief on their faces when you walked into that car. You might have only been in that car for 3 or 4 minutes. But that sense of relief really validated my decision to become a cop. And I learned from that. And I always have that in my mind as I do any job. Becoming a cop is it's not an easy decision for anyone. The money's okay, but certainly no one's making a ton of money. And the sense of appreciation isn't always there, but that's okay. That's not why we do it. So if you're going to become a police officer, you better make sure you're doing it for the right reasons. And I have the opportunity to speak at every swearing in. We hire cops every 3 months. And that's part of the story that I tell them. And it's important that they understand that. I tell them that your sole responsibility, no matter what you get assigned to, is to keep the people of the city safe. There's not too many other professions where you have to raise your right hand and swear an oath. Maybe a couple, but not too many. And I tell them, make sure you're paying attention to the words that you say when you take that oath. It's important. And I'm not standing up here and trying to sound corny or anything, but this is a job that it's important. It's important that we have the right people come on the job. It's important that they understand what their mission is. It's important to the safety of this city, and it's also important to the safety of this country. So I'm real proud to be a police officer. I know the last couple of years, especially in 2014 after Ferguson and Garner, not an easy job. I was out there every day for the protest, and a lot of it's self-inflicted, quite frankly. But I saw it, and I knew at that time, I knew we had to evolve. I knew we had to move on. I knew we had to get better. And we've been working on it ever since. And as I speak today, and I want to leave enough time for plenty of questions. I don't have any backup here today, so if they're really tough questions, I might have to phone a friend, but that's okay. That's okay. That's fine. I actually like doing forums like this. I just did a forum with the Metro Industrial Area Foundations. It's a group of churches. I did it up at Baruch College the other day. And it was about dealing with mentally ill and closing Rikers. And it was a two-hour forum. But it's good to hear from people. It's good to hear what they think, because that's how we move forward as a police department. We can't make unilateral decisions. We have to do what's good for everybody in this city. And it's not easy. A couple things I've learned since I've taken this job, and I was the chief of department, which is the highest ranking uniformed member of the service. That's 4 stars. Terry Monahan has that job now. Carlos Gomez took that job for me when I left. And I thought that was a busy job, and it is. You're the highest ranking person wearing that uniform, and there's 36,000 cops and 18,000 civilians, and you're busy all day long from sunrise to way past sunset and sometimes beyond. But and I spent a lot of time with Commissioner Bratton. He's a real gracious guy, gracious person. He kind of showing me the ropes. I don't think he really told me the truth about the job, but that's okay. I think if he told me the entire truth, maybe he thinks I wouldn't have taken it. But what I did learn from him, that it's not just about policing. It's about society. And he's got such a broad perspective on certainly not just the criminal justice system, but on everything that goes on in this city and everything that goes on in this nation. So I'm thankful to him for that. I actually worked for him for three times. I worked for him back in 1990 when he was the chief of the Transit Police Department. He came here from a small Boston police department. Not Boston PD. He was working for, I think, their transit authority has a police department. He was here for a couple years, and I got to meet him back then. And then in '94, he came back as the commissioner, and I worked for him then again. And then he left for 18 years, and lo and behold, he reappeared back in 2014. I was working in the Fugitive Enforcement Division at the time, which was an absolutely fantastic job. But I'll talk a little bit about that later. And then, I worked for him up in his office, and then he made me chief of patrol. Jimmy Hall retired, and then he made me chief of department. And I took that job on November 3rd, 2014, and that's 3 short weeks away from Ferguson and Garner. So it was definitely baptism by fire, without a doubt. It was a tough time for the city, but as I said before, I think we're definitely moving in the right direction. I think we have the right people at the top of the New York City Police Department. I think we have, I know we have a mayor that supports us and understands how important public safety is. But it's great to be here. It really is. Just to get the opportunity to talk about what we're doing as a police department, I think it's important. I think it's important for everybody to hear. Everybody has their perceptions of what goes on in the police departments. I think everybody definitely has their perceptions of what goes on in the NYPD, especially all the TV shows out there. I did have the opportunity to go to the set of Blue Bloods a couple months ago. He's got an unbelievable mustache. But I actually sat on a forum a year ago about what TV police programs, what effect do they have on real-life police departments. And I said, there's some positives there, but they also, I think, they create unrealistic expectations. I think that's the big issue. But we went over to the set of Blue Bloods, and I went over there. I didn't go over there by myself. We had a sergeant that was murdered in November 4th, 2016, Paul Tizzulo. He had responded to a radio run. A young man, held his family hostage at gunpoint, and then he fled the scene. And he was in a car, and the car was stopped, and Paul was shot and killed. Manny Quo, another sergeant, was shot also. But ever since then, I've had the opportunity to speak with his wife many times. Just an absolutely wonderful person. We went to the set of Blue Bloods, and she had the opportunity, Lisa had the opportunity to speak to the people on the set about her experience, about what it means, what happens when you kill a cop. And to all their credit, Bridget Monahan, Donnie Wahlberg, Tom Selleck, you could hear a pin drop. They really appreciated what she had to say. And they really, I think it gave them a better flavor of what it means to be a member of this police department. If you ever have the opportunity to go on our website or just Google NYPD Lisa Tuzzulo, she gives a speech at a plaque dedication on November 4th, 2017 of what it means when you kill a cop. And it's 23 minutes, and it's compelling. She doesn't miss anything. And as she's saying it, she's got Austin, who's 6 now, and Joseph, who's 5, at her knee. So this is what people need to see. They need to see the humanity of police officers. You know, we don't take this job because we get to wear a gun or a shield. We don't take this job because of the power. We take this job because we want to make a difference. We want to do good. You know, and it's a complex society, a lot of complex issues. You know, we do our best with training. We just started implicit bias training this week. I just went to the course the other day. You know, this is the things that we think about. This is the things we think about to help build trust, and that's what it's all about. It's all about building trust. If you don't trust the men and women in the NYPD, we're not going to get safer, and we are safe. You might not always read about it. You might not always hear about it on TV. And that's not a knock against the media. It's not. You know, I've had very frank discussions with some reporters about, you know, why is it always negative? And the response is, well, good news is no news. And it's kind of cynical, but that's just the way it is, I guess. Maybe we can do something about that. I think you need to hear good stories about the NYPD. Of course, you need to hear the bad stories. You do. You know, there's 36,000 cops. Certainly not each and every one of them is a wonderful human being. I could never stand up here and say that. You know, I don't defend the indefensible. You know, sometimes there's a lot of gray in policing, and you will hear me defend people if I don't know all the facts. That's fine. And let's see what happens. Let's let this play out. Let's do the investigation. But I think it's important for everybody in the city to really get a feel for what it's like to do this job. And you know, it's coming up from the inside. It's kind of from the inside. It came from the transit police, and we merged on April 2nd, 1995. And you say, well, why do you remember that date? Because it was a big date for all 4,000 transit cops. We were a smaller police department, a very effective police department, and we were being absorbed by a 30,000 person police department. We didn't know where our future was going to be. We didn't know what promotional opportunities were going to be there. We didn't know what our assignments were going to be. But you know, in the end, it was important that we did merge. So I think it's got to be transit, the Transit Bureau, the Housing Bureau, Patrol Services Bureau, the Detective Bureau. We all have to have the same mission. And I think the Transit Police actually back in 95, maybe we were heading in the wrong direction. It's important that we work together, and I've had, as Ross said, I've had a lot of different jobs. You might think, well, this guy can't even hold a job for a year or two, but there's a lot of things that we do well in the NYPD, and one of them is to make sure that we build leadership, and to build leadership, you have to be exposed to different things. So I did train patrol in '83. I went to the police academy for a little while after that, and then I was lucky enough to pass the sergeant's test, the lieutenant's test, the captain's test. And I don't know if you know anything about civil service testing. It is, the entry test was the entry test, not the hardest thing in the world, but the civil service test, if you see somebody out there wearing sergeant's stripes or lieutenant's bars or captain's bars, that person spent 6, 7, 8 months studying 2 or 3 hours a day. Just to pass that test. And that's all, well, taking care of their families, coming to work for 8.5 hours a day. So, you know, if you see somebody wearing sergeant stripes, that's a really dedicated person, and it's quite a success. And I get to talk to all the new sergeants, and I get to talk to all the new lieutenants and all the new captains, and I tell them some of what I'm telling now. But, and it's important that we carry on that tradition, because it's easy to become cynical as a cop. It is. You know, I have two sons. My youngest son says I'm the most cynical person in the world. I don't think so. I don't think so. Maybe to those two guys, because I don't know. I don't know if I'd want a father that was a cop, but that's okay. Cynicism, it's easy to be cynical because, you know, look at what the men and women in this police department get exposed to. You know, if you're working, even if you're not working in a busy place. Look what happened on Halloween of this year. Ryan Nash, he's a 25-year-old kid in the 1st Precinct. They're at Stuyvesant High School. I think it was 2:30 in the afternoon, and somebody comes in and says there's a guy out on West Side Highway, West Street, with 2 guns. He just crashed into a school bus. They didn't even know that Saipov killed 8 people. But Ryan went out with his partners, John Hasiotis and 2 other guys, and Ryan went right to it. Didn't even think about it. You know, he didn't know that it was a paintball gun or a pellet gun. He didn't know that. He just went out there, and you see the wreckage. I don't know, you all probably watched the news, and you saw that scene, just a unbelievable tragedy, but Ryan went out there and went right to it. So these are the things I get to see, and I think it's been a long time since somebody has come up through the ranks and been the police commissioner, and that's certainly not to take anything away from Bill Bratton, you know, or Ray Kelly or anybody that's come before me. But you know, I've gone through, the only rank I didn't hold, there's 2 ranks I haven't held. I wasn't a detective, and I wasn't a 2-star chief. But every other rank I've held. And that's important, because I get to, as I make decisions, I know what it's like to be a cop. I know what it's like to be a sergeant. I know what it's like to be a lieutenant. I certainly know what it's like to be a precinct commander, a captain, which is, for me, I had 2 transformational moments in the police department. But just to talk about growing up on the inside, it's got its advantages and its disadvantages. Its advantage is that you know everybody. You know the personalities, you know everybody's capabilities, but the disadvantage is that you know everybody. and that's sometimes that's difficult to overcome, because when you work in different positions and different capacities, and you deal with people, you know, sometimes as a peer as opposed to a supervisor, the relationships change. So you have to do your best to make sure that you remain objective and you keep an open mind. But you know, coming up through the ranks was certainly an experience. Some of the best jobs I had was I was in the warrant section as a lieutenant for 2 years, and I was the CO, the commanding officer of the Manhattan. I'm going to try not to use cop jargon. It's hard though after speaking it for 35 years. I was the CO of the Manhattan Warrant Squad, and we got up at 3 o'clock in the morning. You got to work at 4:30, and you're knocking on doors by 4:45. You know, and it's a great time to catch people who are wanted. They're either coming home or they're still sleeping. But you know, I worked with 40, 50 detectives. They all had families, and every morning we came in. Not everybody was cheery. I'm not actually a morning person, but when you see the dedication and the courage displayed by these men and women every day, it's really quite amazing. Now you have a warrant for somebody, and you're knocking on that door. You don't know what's on that other side of the door. You do all the research, you do all the computer checks, but you don't know what's on the other side of that door. And to do that, you know, 10, 12, 15 times every morning, it's pretty spectacular. And that's definitely how we're keeping the city safe. So growing up on the inside was again a real positive. The other transformational moment for me was I had 3 precincts. I was a precinct commander for 6.5 years, and that is there's only 77 precincts. There's transit districts, there's housing PSAs. They're all important positions, but when you're a precinct commander, you are responsible for that geography. I had the Central Park precinct, which 843 beautiful acres. I was there for 2 years. It was an interesting place. Did okay. We actually broke a pretty good pattern there. We had a number of robberies, and the fact pattern just didn't sound right. And I had a detective, Louis Delapisi. He actually ended up leaving the police department and joined the military. Louis quite a human being. But we found out there was a pattern that people were coming from overseas, and I guess they were buying travelers insurance overseas, and they'd come here and spend 7, 8 days in the United States. And the day before they left, they would report a robbery in Central Park, because everybody got robbed in Central Park. And then I think it was 99. We locked up about 15 people for filing false police reports. So you looked at the CompStat sheet and you go, wow, there's a lot of robberies in Central Park. But it turns out, I think that the one that really broke the ice was there's a guy said that he was walking up the East Drive, and a guy came by in rollerblades and stole his watch, bag or whatever. And I go, I think I just saw that on Mod Squad a couple of weeks ago. I'm pretty sure that didn't happen. And then Louis got him in and talked to him, and he gave him up, and we gave it up. If you look at Central Park now, there's maybe a dozen and a half robberies in a year. Back in the 90s, how many robberies were there? Hundreds and hundreds. And again, not happening by accident. Last year we had, in 2017, we had 292 homicides. And it's 292 too many. I'll give you that. But you have to compare that to 1990. There were 2,245 homicides in this city. In 1990, there were 5,000 shootings. And a shooting it's not a cop shoot. That's not a police officer involved shooting. That's somebody, two people shooting at each other. We had 5,000. Last year we had a little over 780. And then back in 1990, we had 600,000 Part 1 index crimes. Whenever you hear crime is up or down, those are the 7 major crimes. It's murder, rape, robbery, burglary, felony assault, grand larceny, and grand larceny auto. I think that's 7. So whenever you hear crimes up or down, those are the crimes that they're talking about. We had 600,000. Last year we had under 100,000. So that's that downward trend has been going on since '94, and it actually all started in '92 when David Dinkins, when Mayor Dinkins was able to hire thousands of extra police officers. If you were here in the late '80s and early '90s, this was not the place it is now. It's a pretty safe city. We still have a lot of work to do. There's no doubt about that. We have a ton of work to do. 292 is too many. But how we got here, it's a lot of hard work, and certainly not. When I talk about how the city's doing, I'm talking about how the city's doing. I'm not saying how great the NYPD did. I'm not like that. I know it takes the whole city to do it. We have terrific partners. We have the FBI. I know they've been taking some heat lately, but Bill Sweeney's the assistant director in charge of the New York office, and Bill and his people are absolutely committed to their mission, and that's to help keep this city safe. We had a police officer that was murdered back on October 20th, 2015, Randolph Holder. It started out as a gunfight between 2 gangs at East River houses. It's on 102nd and in East River Drive, between First and East River Drive. They had a shootout, and the bad guy steals a bike, and if you ever drive up the FDR Drive, between like 96th Street and 125th Street, you see that path along the river? That's where he went. He went northbound. And there's an overpass, a pedestrian overpass at about 120th Street. And Randolph and his partner confronted him there, and Randolph was shot and killed. We ended up making the apprehension, and Cy Vance's office did a wonderful job of prosecuting him, and he was convicted, and he's in jail, he's in prison now, which is good. But when that happened, Bill and the Southern District, another great partner, came to us and said, we want to help. And they did. We did a medium-term investigation, not one that went on for years and years, so 6 months, I think. And we ended up taking out some really bad people at East River houses. Cy Vance did a case at the same time, and he took out a number of really bad people, too. So life's a lot better for the people up in East River houses. It's not just better for the men and women of the PSA 5, which is the housing service area up there. It's better for the people that live in East River houses. I worked in the 2-5, which is a little north of there, and there's a lot of housing up there, too. One thing that I have learned in my 35 years is that everybody wants what we want. Everybody wants what you want. They want to live in peace. They want to do what's right for their family and live productive lives. And that sounds, I don't know if simplistic's the right word, but it's the truth. Even as the police commissioner, I go around the city, all over the city. I was just out in the 8-3 in Bushwick. I went to the community council meeting. I'm going to the 7-9 next week. I was up in the 4-5, which is in the Bronx. I get out as much as possible. We've embarked on a series of meetings with clergy throughout the city. You go there, there's 100 people from the clergy. I bring all of my executive staff. It's not just me. And we talk about what the issues of the day are. I had something really, when we just started this, I think actually Commissioner Bratton was still here. We were up at a pretty big clergy meeting. Reverend Q English, she's organized this. And somebody made another statement to me that really hit home. They said that, listen, we understand, the NYPD does a lot of work, but can you make policing that something that is done with us and not to us? You think you step back and you go, you have to listen to how people feel. What do they want from the police department? And that's why we've embarked on neighborhood policing. And neighborhood policing I'll give you the 30-second version or maybe the 3-minute version of it. And you're going to hear what I'm saying. You go, well, that doesn't sound so complicated. That doesn't sound so difficult. It's not. It's not. It's a concept that people have talked about, but I think sometimes they miss the point. Our job is to keep people safe, pure and simple, whether it's from traditional crime, whether it's from terrorism, which I'm going to talk a little bit about. And I want to make sure we give you plenty of time to ask questions. But it's just neighborhood policing goes to the essence of who we need to be as police officers. Prior to neighborhood policing, and we started it in May of 2015, we started it in the 3-3 and the 3-4, which is Manhattan, the northern tip of Manhattan. It's Inwood, Washington Heights. And the 100 and the 101, which is down in the Rockaways. We started it there because there's a lot to lose here. If you're going to change the way you police in New York City, and with this downward trend on crime, you better make sure you're doing it right. So that we did it there, and basically what we did was we resected the precincts into natural neighborhoods, and we put the same cops, same sector cops in those same sectors every day, and we made it a priority that whatever happens in that sector, they handle it. And then we created a position called the Neighborhood Coordination Officer. There's 2 of them per sector. And the NCOs are the conduit between the community and the steady sector cops. This way, our police officers finally have the opportunity to make a connection to the people that they want to protect and serve. And that is, I guess the biggest part of this is we're giving them almost a third of their day when they're not answering radio runs. In my old precinct in the 4-4, on a busy, not even on a regular night, on a regular 4 to 12, one police car handles anywhere from 15 to 25 radio runs, 911 calls, in an 8-hour period. Now we have this expectation, and we've always had this expectation that we want police officers to be better connected to the community. But if you're in a sector car, where do you get the opportunity to do that? Or even if you're not in a sector car, say if you're in anti-crime or if you're in a domestic violence unit or if you're in a traffic unit, where do you get that opportunity? In that old model of policing, you don't. So I think our expectations were kind of unrealistic. And with neighborhood policing, we've made that change. We're in 56 of the 77 precincts now. We're in all the housing PSAs. And we're moving on to the transit districts too. When you say, well, neighborhood policing in transit districts, does that really make sense because it's kind of a transient community? No, it does. You know what? The same people use the same subway stations every day. And if we have the same cops there, there's the opportunity for us to build trust and for people to feel comfortable enough to come up and let us know what their issues are. Another thing going on with neighborhood policing, the NCOs in every sector are holding meetings 3 or 4 times a year. And these are meetings in their sector run by the NCOs, not run by the sergeants, not run by the lieutenants, not run by the captains, run by the NCOs with the steady sector cops there to have people come in and talk about what the issues are and how we can move forward together. Some of the meetings, I think everybody's probably seen the commercials on TV. Probably thinking, why is the NYPD running commercials? It's important. It's important that people hear what the city's doing and what the NYPD's doing. But at these meetings, some of them only have had 20 or 30 people, but we've had meetings up in the Bronx where there were 400 people. We had meetings in Brooklyn where there were 400 or 500 people. So people want to do this. They want to connect with us. You know, they don't want an occupying force. They want to see our humanity. You know, they want us to get to know them, to see what they want, to see what they need. So it's been almost 3 years now, and it's doing three things. It's making the cops have accountability, which is important. It's making the community feel good about having a relationship and building up trust with the police officers. But the best thing about it, it's continuing to push crime down. You know, those numbers I talked to you about, 292 homicides, 780 shootings, under 100,000 index crimes for 2017. And we're in the middle of February 2018, and we're down 11 homicides, and we're down 8 shootings, and we're down about 5% in overall crime. Now, can we hold that for 2018? Can we keep that downward trend going? Yeah, I think so. I think working together we can. I think us trying to do it by ourselves, definitely not. And there are still issues in some precincts around the city. There are still crime issues. There's still trust issues. You know, you look at East Flatbush, that was our busiest command last year as far as violence. A lot of work to do there. The 4-0 in the South Bronx. In my old precinct, the 4-4, there's still some issues of violence. You know, and people talk about, well, crime is down now. Do you need as many cops? Yeah, you do. Of course you do. Because once you stop looking at the people engaged in violence and crime, it's just going to pop right back up again. You know, it all begins with public safety. We did another thing that was really instrumental in helping us push crime down. We had many different bureaus. We have a meeting every Thursday morning. It's CompStat. It's a crime strategy meeting. Some people, I think it's a great developer of talent. It's a good way to build leadership. As a precinct commander, if crime is up in your precinct, you have the opportunity to come down to One Police Plaza, come into a room with about 150 people. You come down with your borough commander and all the people that work in your precinct, the detective lieutenant, the narco gang vice lieutenant, and you get to explain what's going on in your precinct, why crime is up, but most importantly, you know, what you're going to do about it. What's your plan? Because we don't have an expectation that crime's going to go up. I don't think anybody in this room would think it would be okay for crime to go up in New York City. Because you got to take a look around. Just take a look at this city. Look at the number of people here. Go into Times Square. Take the subway. I think you know, we've increased our population here over the years, and it's a great place. And I have the opportunity to go to many other places now as the police commissioner. Been to Chicago, been to the West Coast, been up to Boston, been to many cities, seen many police departments. We've been doing this for a long time. People ask, well, you know, what's going on in Chicago? What's going on in Baltimore? We've been at this since '92. This isn't something that we just thought about a couple of years ago. And I think moving forward, we're definitely in a position to keep pushing crime down. And there's going to be issues. There's always going to be issues. There's 36,000 cops. There's 8.5 million New Yorkers. Certainly wouldn't stand up here and say there's never going to be any issues, challenges, problems. Of course there are. And we're human beings dealing with human beings. But we have an obligation to make sure that we recruit the right people. And recruitment's not an issue for the NYPD. It's not. It's an issue in other cities around the country, but it's not here. People still want to become NYPD cops. And that's a good thing. And the diversity is another thing we probably don't get out enough. The diversity of the police department. We're a majority-minority police department. The numbers aren't exact, but it's pretty close to the numbers of the demographics of the city. And that's important. I spoke about trust. You know, people want to see a police department that looks like the diversity of the city, and it does. You know, we just had some real good news. We got the results of the sergeant's test, and those numbers look real good too. And then as you go up the ranks, it gets a little thinner, but that'll be changed over time. I just made some executive promotions about a month and a half ago. I think if you looked at the diversity of the leadership now, it's better. It's certainly not perfect, but time will take care of that. You know, the people that we're putting into precincts, these are considerations. It's not just about, you know, what your past was. We take so many factors into consideration when we give people precincts. Because that's it. That's the key. That's the key to the operation. But just to get back to the Detective Bureau, we had the Organized Crime Control Bureau. That was narco, gang, vice, a couple other units. It was a separate bureau, and I'm not sure if their mission was the same as everyone else's. So we took that and we dissolved it into the Detective Bureau, and now Bob Boyce, Chief Bob Boyce, you see him on TV all the time. He's got to retire in 2 months. You have to as a uniformed member of the service, you have to retire the day before you turn 63. So Bob's retiring in the middle of April. But we took all the detectives and we pulled out all the investigators under Bob to make sure that he can address the very, very small percentage of the population in this city involved in violence and crime. They engage in short-term cases, medium, long-term cases, and they do it in conjunction with the prosecutors. You know, with Eric out in Brooklyn, Mike McMahon, Cy, up in the Bronx, with Darcel, and then with Judge Brown out in Queens. And it's important that you do that. This way, once the case is over, we're not presenting it to the prosecutor. You know, we've been working hand in hand, and we can have an effective prosecution. And if anybody is involved in violence or carrying a gun, they suffer the consequences there. We also do that with the U.S. attorneys, the Southern District and the Eastern District. A great relationship with both. People still fear the feds. If you tell somebody you're taking a case federal, people start to really think about what they've been involved in, and it's really truly helpful. But just a lot of great things. Still a lot of challenges, but we are a police department that understands that if we don't evolve, we're not going to be as effective as we need to be. I just want to talk about terrorism for a couple more minutes. I think it's almost quarter after. I want to leave about 15 minutes for questions. So make no mistake about it. We've had 3 terrorist attacks in 18 months. We had the Chelsea bombing. That was the first full day of my being a police commissioner. That was September 17th, 2016. I just finished working, and I got a phone call. The job first came over as a bus exploding on 23rd Street. So I came back to the office and went up to the scene. And at first I was a little taken aback, but then I just took a moment, caught my breath, and said, you know, look who you work with. We're gonna figure out what's going on here, and we're gonna solve this. I got to the scene. Bill Sweeney was there. Dan Nigro from the fire department, great partners. ATF was there. John Miller, Bob Boyce. The mayor came up, and there was no squabbling about, you know, this is my jurisdiction, this is my crime scene. We did it together. The FBI bomb techs, along with the NYPD bomb squad, they cut that crime scene into sections. They worked each section, and as they did, and they got that evidence, they brought it down to Quantico, and we were able to identify Rahimi within 35 hours. And then in my official swearing in that Monday, I had jokingly said to John Miller, I said, hey John, can you make sure you catch this guy before the end of the ceremony? Because we have a press conference right afterwards. Right, Rocco? And in the middle of the ceremony, somebody handed me a note. They said they got him. And a couple of really brave cops in Linden, New Jersey found him on the street. They ended up getting into a shootout with him, and they were able to apprehend him. So that was within 50 hours. And then on Halloween, this past Halloween, a real nice day, beautiful day, you know, something not too many would expect, that's for sure. But we need to pay attention to what's going on, not just here. We have to pay attention to what's going on around the world. We know what happened in Nice, and that's why we changed the way we do our security at all the major events. You know, you look at Thanksgiving, you look at New Year's Eve, there's a ring of sanitation trucks around the area. And to think that in New York City you have to do that, I guess it's a little shocking. But and to think that we need people with rifles, cops with rifles all around the city. Think about that. Even 5 years ago, would you think that, everybody would kind of look at that and say, is that right? But we get nothing but positive comments about that now. People feel safe. But, on Halloween, I told you what transpired. Make no mistake about it, this guy was inspired. We did some, you take a look at his social media, and he was looking at ISIS videos, and he's from New Jersey and came here, and he did what he did. And then, 6 weeks later, we had a suicide bomber in the subway. This was not a terrorist-related event. It was a terrorist event. We have to be realistic about this. And I don't think it's going to stop anytime soon. So I think that's why it's so important that we get all 8.5 million people in this city and people in the surrounding areas to trust what we do and to make sure they understand why we do what we do. We're not trampling on anybody's rights. If we're doing an investigation, it's because we have leads. We have the JTTF, the Joint Terrorist Task Force, constantly monitors all the threat stream, and we make sure we investigate them. And then if they're not looking at it, our Intelligence Bureau looks at it. I know there's been controversy over the years, but this is something that we need to do, and we do it constitutionally. And it's important that we do it. And then the subway bomber, this is everybody in this room, I'm sure, has been down that corridor. It's between 42nd and 8th and Times Square. Talk about a confined space, right? Everybody's walked down that corridor. This guy intentionally detonated that bomb there. This wasn't accidental. And he built that bomb, and another person that was looking at ISIS videos. So this is something that definitely keeps me up at night. But I get to see what we're doing, what our federal partners are doing, and it helps me relax a little bit. But we all have to be on guard. We all have to pay attention to what's going on. I have my 24-year-old son walks. He lives in the city, and I was in the car the other day over at City Hall, and I saw him. He's probably not going to like this, but I saw him walk by, and he's got his headphones on, looking at his phone. And I got out and I said, "What are you doing? What are you doing? Pay attention. What if you see something that makes you uncomfortable? That doesn't look right. Everybody in the city's got to do it. They have to do that, but they also have to make sure that we have to make sure that they trust us. That if they tell us something, then we're going to do something about it, and we're going to do it right. We're going to do it constitutionally. So there's the city's in great shape, but we always have to be on guard. This is what we get paid to do. And I know moving forward, we're going to make the city even safer as long as we continue to build a partnership with everybody in this great city. So at this point, I'll take whatever questions you might have. Thank you very much.
As people are going to the microphones, let me just first acknowledge Council Member Alicia Samuel. Thank you for coming. I appreciate that. And I also want to acknowledge the people who work so hard to make these events happen. Brian Kasuba, who is our Deputy Director of the Center for New York City Law, Lillian Valle Santiago, Jesse Deno, Dorothy Rodriguez, and May V, who are all at the center. Now let's, as we always do, we'd like to invite the representative of the special sponsor, in this case Guidepost Solutions, to make the first comment. That's Joe Jaffe, counsel to Guidepost.
Commissioner, a two-part question, if you would. First, thank you very much for the work you and the department do. The first part of the question is, what are the three top priorities of things that you and the department need to make your job better, easier, and more effective? And the second part is, what can those of us in the room do to make sure that the elected representatives and others deliver that to you?
Okay. All right. Thanks for that. So what we need is the support of everybody in this great city. We also need to make sure that as we move through 17 and 18, that we continue to get the federal funding from Washington that we need to help combat terrorism. And I think last I checked, and I think this number is pretty accurate, it's about $110 million. There's a couple other grants out there, the Eddie Byrne grant, which is a federal grant that goes to police departments, and it's named after a police officer that was killed 30 years ago. Eddie Byrne, his brother Larry Byrne is our Deputy Commissioner of Legal Matters. We just had a memorial mass for him yesterday up at St. Pat's. This grant is named for him, so if we were to lose that, that would really be quite, I guess ironic is the word, but we just need to make sure we have the funding. We do have the support of Mayor de Blasio, without a doubt. He understands he needs to keep the city safe. We meet with him on a regular basis. He's very engaged in what we do, and he's a huge proponent of neighborhood policing. The city council helped us hire 1,300 more cops so we can fully implement, well, not fully because we have 19 more precincts to go, 20 more precincts to go, neighborhood policing. So we're able to hire 1,300 cops and then hire 700 civilians so we could put people back on patrol. So we are getting the support from the electeds. And again, it's not about everybody singing the same tune all the time. Sometimes it's New York City. There's going to be issues. There's going to be challenges. People are not going to like what we do sometimes. We're not going to like what people say sometimes. But in the spirit of that, and the spirit of keeping the city safe, I think we're heading in the right direction.
On this side? Yes.
Yep.
John, from this point on, I so would appreciate it if you tell your officers to stop abusing me at the outer sideline subway train stations, also at the parades. Okay? I'm tired of your officers telling me where I can stand on parade day, especially when I'm not standing in the frozen zone. If I'm not standing in the frozen zone, they shouldn't approach me and say, get lost, basically.
Good.
Okay, and also at the subway train stations, I so would appreciate if they don't ask me if I'm boarding the train. I so would appreciate if they don't tell me you're at the board of train leave the station. I so would appreciate if they don't tell me I can't speak to the station agents, can't social service station agents. What I do, generally speaking, is my business.
All right, so if you have a complaint, I have a couple of detectives that are here with me, that's fine. But just let me tell you, as far as stop, I want to talk about stop, question, and frisk, now that you bring it up. We went, in 2011, we had 600,000 stops. Last year, we had a little over 10,000. So and one thing I did forget when I was speaking, with this crime reduction, the downward trend of crime, that's being done with less arrests and less summonses. So we're focusing our enforcement where it needs to be, and I'm sorry you had that experience. On this side?
First, I want to say hello to Mr. Royce Sandler, who was my first commissioner 30 years ago at the Department of Transportation. I'm surprised. When 1992, when Mayor Giuliani came, his first policy, stop and frisk, it did work. It cleaned the city. And it was used for 20 years, the two mayors, and it gave great results. And myself, I was once stopped and frisked, and I was very much okay. So now I realize there is a conflict here between this current mayor and what...
Let me, because we only got about 5 minutes. Let me go. I'm going to speak right to that. So I came on in 1983. I've been a cop for 35 years and 2 months. I've been involved in the whole process. In the 90s, we policed a certain way because crime was out of control. Look where we are now. We need to talk about results. 292 homicides as opposed to 2,000. 780 shootings as opposed to 5,000. The methods that we're employing now work, and not only do they work, they help build trust with everybody in this city, and that's where we need to go. We don't need 600,000 stops. Okay, thank you.
Hi, we met on June 26th last year at New York City Bar Association. I told you about the federal civil rights lawsuit against Howard Redmond, the mayor's head of security.
Okay.
You claimed at the time that you didn't know about that lawsuit, that you would talk to Mr. Redmond.
Right.
Since then, the mayor's head of security detail, they've been engaging in voter fraud. I've tried testifying at City Hall on September 8th, also November 27th. I was illegally excluded from those meetings in violation of 18 U.S.C. 245. So the question is this: if I talk to you at the New York City Bar Association, you're not under oath today while you're making these remarks. Why should the city trust what you're saying? And I have a sworn deposition that I gave. So the question is, should the people in this room believe you or me?
You have ongoing litigation with Redmond, so I'm not going to talk about that.
Why not?
People should trust what I'm saying, because just look at what the NYPD does each and every day. Now, we've had this conversation before, so I'm going to just move on to this side.
Hi. Thank you very much for your remarks, wonderful remarks, and I definitely feel very safe in the city, and I wanted to thank you for that. I'm an attorney with Environmental Defense Fund, and we have been working on combating engine idling for over a decade now. The city has committed to reducing greenhouse gas emissions by 80% by 2050, and as we know, stabilizing the climate and reducing air pollution is also saving lives. Is there something that the traffic enforcement agents could do, that they give more idling tickets so the drivers, especially the ones in trucks and buses that have diesel emissions that are harmful to our health, get the message that engine idling is actually illegal in the city? And that would reduce air pollution and save lives. So I was thinking the traffic enforcement agents actually have the authority now to give those tickets. They're not armed. It's confrontational because the driver is usually in the car when the driver is illegally idling the engine.
Okay.
Is there something that they could be
May I
paired
ask
up?
We got the
Yeah.
question. Only the people standing will be able to ask questions, and please make them short because
Yeah.
everybody would like to speak.
Yeah, is there something that they could be
I'll-
paired up
yeah,
to
I'll
give
talk
more
to Chief
tickets?
Chan. He's our Chief of Transportation.
Yeah.
And look at what kind of enforcement they do for engine idling.
Yeah, it's not a lot. That's why I'm
Right.
asking if more
Okay.
could be done.
All right,
Thank
thanks.
you.
Thanks for the question.
Good morning, Commissioner. I have a land use question for you. Increasingly, the response to counterterrorism, or the counterterrorism measures, the response to terrorism involves bollards or land use measures in the public realm. I'm wondering if you could comment on the department's role in making decisions about those kind
Sure.
of placements.
Yeah.
And specifically, reviewing those decisions over time. On Wall Street, we have pedestrian barricades that were put in place after 1993, the bombing of the World Trade Center.
Right.
Reevaluating those decisions over time, the continuing role of the department.
Yeah, it is. We have people on our counterterrorism unit. They're specifically assigned to look at infrastructure throughout the city. I can take a look at downtown and see the last time that was looked at. But the bollards is, we're working with DOT. Everybody remembers what happened last June in Times Square, right? There was somebody came in with a car, made a U-turn at 42 and 7, ended up killing a young lady and running over, I think it was 21 other people, injuring them. The reason why he stopped, I think it was at either 45th or 46th Street, was because there was a line of bollards. I think everybody probably remembers that news clip. So we are working with DOT to identify the highest pedestrian areas in the city, and we're actually actively engaged now in putting up bollards. As a temporary measure, we put up the concrete blocks. I'm sure you saw those too. We did something outside of St. Pat's and over at Times Square and down at Herald Square too. There's a number of areas that we're looking to put bollards. But again, look, anywhere in the city you go, look at the pedestrians. I don't know if we can bollard off the whole city, but we're looking at the high volume places. So thanks for that question.
My quick question. I'm Alice Labrie. I'm former U.S. Department of State Foreign Service. And two quick questions, but a shout out to my 32nd precinct. No matter what time of night I get out and look out there on Lenox Avenue, they're there.
That's Inspector Mike Baker, doing a great job.
Right. Sorry, sir. My two quick questions. First of all, Crane's New York Business had an article that the NYPD has given a $27 million grant to place victims advocates in every precinct. The NYPD is leading the way in the U.S. That's a comment. And the other is, sir, very quickly, what I'm watching when I'm watching Lenox Avenue and all the arrests across the 145th Street Bridge about training. In some cities, they ask you to get out the car. They don't come up to your window to investigate. So I didn't know if that's something we better be careful of now.
Yeah, it's better that people stay in their car. It's
okay.
better for the people we're stopping, and it's safer for the police officers, so.
It is?
Now, what was the first part of your question there?
Oh, just
Oh,
letting you know.
victims advocates. So yeah, this is important too. So right now in every precinct and every PSA, we have a DV, domestic violence advocate. And with this grant, we're putting crime victims advocates in each and every precinct too, which is important. It's important for people to know that they'll get the help they need if they're the victim of a crime. Yes, sir.
Roger Hers, time, an acronym for To Improve Municipal Efficiency. Thank you for your leadership and good work. My question is about cops on bikes. It was Teddy Roosevelt in 1895 who first started the bicycle squad. It was dormant for a while and then about 30 years ago reinstituted and has been very cost effective as far as I know. And I compliment you on the strategic response group. I've seen the films online and very impressive. You indicated that only some of the precincts currently have bicycle police. Are there plans to extend this, particularly within the community program?
Yeah, bicycles are a really effective way to increase uniform presence. I don't have the numbers as to exactly which PSAs and precincts have bicycle squads, but this is something that I'm a proponent of. I was the CO of the park for a couple years. I actually went out and got myself bike trained. Believe it or not, you have to go to bike training. And it's a great way for people to see you, and it's a great way to patrol. So I'm a huge proponent.
Great, thank you.
Okay.
Okay, I'm sorry to say we're at 9:30, and so I'm sorry to the people that stood up after I said that we were going to take no more questions. So we're going to thank everybody. I want to thank particularly the commissioner. As those of you who come know that we always give a product of the scholarship of this law school to our speaker, and so I'd had some, but I feel a little sheepish about it because it's about the police department. And I don't think that Commissioner O'Neill needs much advice. He seems to know so much about the department coming up through it. It's really a remarkable morning to have and to actually sit and listen to you reminisce, explain, talk about philosophy, and tell us about the future plans. You really did cover an enormous amount for us today, and it was a great talk. What I did have for you was an article from 15 years ago that it talked about advice that Teddy Roosevelt gave to the incoming police commissioner in 1898. And so I have an article about that. And then in 1996, we had a symposium here on the police, at that time the Mollen Commission. And at that program, 4 former police commissioners spoke, William Bratton, Benjamin Ward, Richard Condon, and Patrick Murphy. And they have lots of advice for somebody who doesn't need any more advice. Thank you so much. Thank you. Our next breakfast was with Pat Foy on March 9th. We see you then.
Thanks, Ross.
Thank you.
Thank you. Thanks.
It was terrific.
Thank
You
you.
know, it was